Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate it more than you can possibly imagine. And also, we'd like to thank our guests. We have Jennifer Truman and Jackson Oliver, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is going to be a great story, a great half hour. So this young man is brighter than most of you in the audience. I'm sorry to say that, but, it's true. So now, fill us in on what awards, what did he just win?
Jackson and his teammates on the academic decathlon team from Bret Harte had qualified for state. And through the end of the competition, Jackson earned a gold in the scholastic division, which is scoring the highest over, I don't have the exact number, but several hundred other students in the state in the same category.
Very nice. And that was in math, right?
It was in math, yes.
Now, we were talking before we started rolling. Now, does math run in your family? It's not in the genes?
It doesn't really. My dad's an English teacher. My mom teaches elementary. I think they both stopped being able to help me with my math homework when I was like 14.
Very nice. Now, you had mentioned are you going to pursue a career or an academic path that the math specific use those skills?
Yeah, I was planning on heading into aerospace engineering or just general engineering at Purdue University. It happens to be pretty math heavy, although hopefully it'll end up being a bit lighter than everybody seems to make it out to be.
Well, on the aerospace stuff, I want to say congratulations on coming of age at the time we are, because we grew up in the space race and the air, but it kind of went out of favor for a couple decades. Now I think it's back, and it's I think the opportunities in that field are going to be huge.
And it's certainly a wonderful time to be heading into aerospace engineering with SpaceX and all that. It's nice to see it kind of, kick back.
Do you follow it as a hobby now? Do you follow all that stuff now?
I keep up with what I can, but I'm just too tired to keep up with the news lately.
Yeah. But I guess from some of the stuff that Musk has said, some of the space, it's all math, right? Isn't it all? It's all math.
A lot of math, yeah.
A little bit about the academic decathlon. How little for people who don't know, what is?
Academic decathlon is actually a national on the national stage across the United States, and as the name says, it is a decathlon. 10 events, all academically based on one theme. This past year, the theme was the Cold War. And students were challenged to take tests on that theme in various different subjects, with the exception of math and then the speech and the interview.
There was a lot of missile math during the Cold War, right?
A fair bit of missile math and the start of all we would call, rocket programs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So this was the Cold
War. So the other subjects, such as literature and social science and art and music and the others, are based on the theme of the Cold War.
Which had all kinds of sub-themes and... Yeah. Did you find the kids were interested in that? Or were they complaining? It was...
I try and coach my students to pick one of those specific areas and really focus on that one area that they're most interested in.
So they can find an interest in it.
And so there were some that wanted to focus on the book, the literature for this year, or wanted to focus on the history. And of course, Jackson naturally gravitated to his best subject area, and that being mathematics.
Yeah. On the, you had said that you were planning on going to Purdue, right?
Yes.
Now, what are on some of the engineering paths? Is that what you'd like to do? Is it more of an engineering path? And you have if it's the aerospace one is. What are some of the alumnuses of Purdue? Are there any of the famous?
Actually, the most notable of which would be Neil Armstrong.
That's right.
Yeah, outside of, I think, MIT, Purdue has the most astronaut alumni of any, non-military college in the U.S.
Now, did he come back there and do some lecturing and stuff later in life? I think he did,
I believe he did for a little while.
Okay.
I know a couple of the astronauts from the Apollo era did, because they were all really highly educated.
Yeah. So have you gone back and looked at a lot of the old Apollo video footage and
I've
stuff?
ran through it. I actually was lucky enough to receive a box from my grandparents who had, newspaper clippings from back when it first landed on the moon.
Yeah.
And so I have a couple of those framed in my bedroom. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot of, video or pictures that are
this is going to
accessible.
Be really putting my age in perspective, but I was born in 1963, and so I was 6 when they landed on Apollo 11, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember Apollo 10, sitting in front of the black and white TV. My parents were telling me, don't sit so close, don't sit so... But I remember sitting just transfixed for basically all of Apollo 11. And it was interesting. That was a very formative... It was I remember it like it was yesterday. It was... but it was a long time ago now. Now, with your age, and has there been any hypothesis on where that path may lead you? If you look at timelines of things, he'll be coming of age, Mars exploration stuff, all the rest of that stuff. Is it?
Yeah, I think that would be nice. It certainly depends on how quickly we can move through things. But I think as I sort of come of age, if I were to go and be like an astronaut or something, like you sort of implied, that would be right around the heyday of exploration, the beginning of it. Because once you get past Mars, there's not a whole lot of places to go.
Right.
There are places that are completely inhabitable, but outside of Mars, the Moon, and Earth, there's not a whole lot of places you would send people willingly.
There's that whole light year time element to it, right?
And time and effort, resources. It's a lot.
Yeah. Bret Harte's history in the academic decathlon. You guys have had some pretty good luck with it over the years. Well, not luck, but
the team, the competition's been around, and I'm going to be scolded for not knowing exactly, but I'm going to say over 30 years, and they've had their runs of successes over the time. I have now been coaching. I think this is my 7th year.
Wow.
Boy, I should have that memorized. And we have earned 3 medals at the state. The first 2 were both silvers in speeches in the honors division, and then Jackson with the gold. And we've been to state 4 out of the last 7 years.
Very nice. Very cool. Now, I was talking to somebody. What was interesting is I won't mention their name because they may know it. You may know it. They had moved here from the Bay Area about 10, 12 years ago. And the interesting thing is they talked about our local schools, and they were just in love with our local schools. And they said our local public schools, and they went through the VUSD route and then to Bret Harte. Mm-hmm. They said our local schools here were better than the private schools they were sending their kids to in the Bay Area. So I thought it was a high compliment, and I think it was I think lots of times it's easy to pick on our public schools, and sometimes it's the popular thing to do, or so to speak. But I know that. In our smaller communities, the teachers care. They live here. This is their home. This is thanks for what you do. I mean that sincerely. It's, because just wonderful experiences from it. So anyway, what are some of the things, that you would tell the younger kids growing up as far as math and stuff like that? Now that you've...
Oh, yeah. One of my particular pet peeves is that people always say, oh, you're a math person, or you're really not a math person. And I think that sort of attitude makes math a lot harder for a lot of people, even if you're not particularly, science or STEM inclined.
Right.
Math is just a tough subject for some people, and this idea that some people are just naturally inclined to get it, they just sort of snap and they have it, and other people don't, keeps a lot of people from, doing through math class the way they should. It's a lot harder, it's a lot more difficult because you just have this attitude like, this isn't what I'm made to do.
Right.
When that's not how people work. It's a completely learnable skill. Same with a lot of things, but particularly math is just so much harder because people keep repeating this idea that some people just aren't cut out for it.
And you think that they can overcome it for the most part?
Easily, always.
A question: do you think there's anything valuable? I was watching one of Musk's speech, and it ties into math. That I think was interesting. Is they asked him how he approached problems, and he always over into physics. He broke it down to absolute elemental pieces and start from there. And I think that I thought was a fascinating to look at it, because then it all goes back to math. Basically you go back to the smallest component building block that you know is certain, and then go from there. And I thought that was, at least could have some applications in a lot of things that we don't do. We always think that, he breaks it down into the elemental level.
it's a wonderful approach called first principles thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's really difficult to sort of work your way back up through that. But the best thing about it, and really the only benefit you get from doing all that extra work is that you toss out all the assumptions you would have possibly made.
Right.
And with things like a lot of Musk's inventions, electric cars, spaceships that land, you have these assumptions like there's no way you can do that, but you have to go through the math and check you actually could do that. But often you're just so trapped in this idea of tradition or what we've done before that you just cannot see these things until you work from the bottom up.
Right. So that's one of the things that you think people can apply that don't think they're good at math, that they can build it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really nice thing to apply if you're stuck somewhere or you just need a new way to think outside of the box. Just get rid of it.
And if you look at history, haven't a lot of our really, leapfrogging inventions and things like that, haven't they come from those principles? You go back down and you kind of, you erase the tradition from it. You look at what is known and
it's a really common thing to break tradition, and that's how you innovate. And often happens within tradition too, but it's a lot easier once you just sort of move out of these things we've done before, because there's so much we haven't done.
Mm-hmm. Is there anybody in math history that's a hero to you, or is there anybody that...
I could not name one off the top of my head, sadly, no.
So first principles, just, it was, eliminate all... No. A little bit on Bret Harte, is if say it's a parent coming to the area and stuff, what things do you think that would recommend Bret Harte to them? I mean, as far as just as an overall, I mean, from the outside looking in, so to speak, is.
Well, we are a small school, which enables us as a staff to, by the time they become Jackson, a month out away from graduation, he could say he's had almost all the teachers.
Right.
Probably just a couple. You have not.
Right.
And familiar with everyone, at least knowing that person, unlike a larger school. And the counter is, by the time they are a senior, most of us can identify, if not exactly their name, we can identify who they are.
Right.
And even a little bit about them.
Do you think that's a benefit of, in some ways, because of the personal interaction and the personal nature of it, there's an accountability there too, right? Isn't it because they're, a person, because you would be disappointing someone as far as a teacher, that if you didn't come through, I mean,
there's a fair bit of pressure like that, actually, knowing people who know you and have expectations of you, and those expectations. I mean, I might be exaggerating a little bit because my dad's a teacher and all, but having people who know you and know your capabilities sort of helps to, push you to do things that you might not have otherwise done, special attention and all that.
To stretch yourself, to make sure that you are getting to the level that you needed to. Yeah.
And as a small school, there is the thought that we don't offer enough.
Right.
And we may not be able to offer everything as a large school, but what we do offer does challenge most students. It's finding those places in which those challenges can be found, whether it's on the sports field or in the gymnasium or in our case, studying.
This comes across right, but I think that small communities, are in some ways a very healthy environment, because one of the things I think we see politically now is that in a larger metropolitan areas, if it is a disadvantaged zip code or disadvantaged region, those kids spend their entire schooling life around other people who are very similar socioeconomically. And I think one of the things that's nice about a school like Bret Harte, and not always, there's some disadvantage to it as well, but everybody mixes with everybody. You see, there's some of the rich kids that have the new cars, but I mean I think it's a more of a healthier environment to where the people not only they can also see that moving up a socioeconomic ladder or something is possible. Is that, am I wrong in that?
I think I agree, and Jackson, you can jump in, is that I think our students more look at the character of their peers and sort themselves out in their friend groups, whichever they may be. But I think it's more based on character.
Yeah, I would agree.
Sure, if somebody's going to drive me to Starbucks because they have the car, that might help a little bit.
Sure.
But it comes down to the offer to drive you, and that's back to the character part.
Right. And that, I think, is, it's a pretty cool thing. Now, did you have some kids that you needed to compete against? You know, they were pretty close to your math level in school that you needed to...
Yeah, actually, my cousin, Michael Owens, is a really good mathematician as well. I believe he placed similar to I did, or to how I did, but he was in a different division.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of the people on the team are really strong, you know, in multiple areas, but math especially as well.
Yeah. I read one thing that was a fascinating thing and I think you're showing that you have, you know, good interpersonal skills as well. They were looking at engineers, and the ones that excelled were the ones that could communicate as well. You know, I mean, historically, the ones that could combine math, you know, really solid core fundamental stuff with the ability to be able to communicate as well. And I think he's doing a very, you know, it's a nice
one of the
thing
10 competitions is an interview.
Yeah.
And that interview is 5 minutes, about 5 minute interview.
5 to
it's
7 minutes.
kind of proposed like a college interview might be, not necessarily a job, but a college interview. And Jackson earned the gold in the regional competition, which is a competition against 3 other local schools. And you are seeing his interview skills here.
Yeah, well-rounded. I think that, you know, that bodes well in a lot of areas in life. But I think especially because, you know, if he has to be an advocate for himself on a career path or something like that, you know, you're capable of doing it. That's a pretty cool thing. A little bit on, you know, some of the history awards, for your classes and stuff, you've had some pretty nice awards too, haven't you?
For my classes.
For some of the history stuff, haven't you an award for some of your
in academic?
Yeah, or not for overall too. For some of the for some of your work, right? As far
for my teaching.
Yeah,
I have been recognized by some organizations as a classroom teacher and some of the things I've done with my students. Yes,
because I know in my other life on the Pine Tree, we've had some some of the releases and stuff on that. So, what's the student enrollment what's the student population at Bret Harte this year?
Last I heard, I believe it was a bit above 400.
Okay,
it is a bit above 400.
Is it?
We just got numbers from our board meeting on Monday. And I believe the high school itself is just under 550.
Okay, so still close to the 6 level.
And then when you bring in our other 2 learning opportunities, we're about 600-ish.
What are you seeing in the pipeline? How are the class sizes for VUS? Are the pipeline coming in? Are they smaller?
You mean that who's
Mark Twain and for Avery?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
I know that there's been talk that enrollment is down at those schools, but I really don't have a...
I did hear one thing, though, that some of the kindergarten classes, with a lot of the people moving up here and stuff, I know that some of the Hazelfish, I know some of that stuff's gone remote. You know, I don't think we're going to know until this thing settles out next year or something, to how many kids are actually physically here now. But, you know, it's... If you could, and this is an interesting, because, you know, lives never turn out the way exactly that you plan it, but say you're a young man right now, the future's wide open before you. If you could say the 50-year-old you looking back, where do you want to be?
50? Either A, I would like to be retired already.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Or I think, I think I would like to be retired. My current, dream occupation, if I could do anything in the world, would be to be an astronaut.
Okay.
But once you're at like 50, it's a health risk. You can't just keep sending up people who were no longer capable of it.
Got it.
I mean, there are some old guys who are out there and went up, but realistically, you want to have the best and the brightest up there. And once you get to a certain age, that's just not you anymore.
So it's all over at 50, right? Is that
I think like 60-ish, but an early retirement wouldn't be too bad.
Right. So would you want to retire on Mars? Do the Musk thing? And
I think I'd like to come back home.
Come back home, yeah.
It would be nice being a pioneer and all, going into a history book, but I think the air here is nice. And I'd like to go swim.
You don't have to worry about keeping manufacturing more of it. That's the whole deal.
I don't have to deal with the whole hostile environment thing. I could just go to sleep on the grass.
So it is nice to hear that you actually would, look to a career as an astronaut and not just on the math side. So you want to use it. Yeah.
Yeah, going into engineering specifically was a choice I made.
Yeah.
That so that I could A, pursue that general area, and B, because it sort of, combined a lot of the things I was interested in.
Right.
I had originally played with the idea of being like a math or a physics major, but I realized that doing that would either, massively increase my workload if I wanted to like double major or something.
Sure.
Or I would just have to give up on pursuing something that I really did enjoy doing. And so engineering sort of rolls a lot of those together and directs them towards something that I actually find very interesting, that being space exploration.
So who's going to win, Blue Origin or SpaceX?
Easily SpaceX.
Easily?
Yeah, by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, I just... it was. I don't know if you saw the kind of the Twitter war that Musk and got into this last week. It was a little bit of a so easily SpaceX. And on that note, I mean, have you been following? I know this goes off our little subject here, but have you been following like the Starliner? What is the one that
Starship?
Starship, yeah.
Yeah, actually, they just had a successful flight 3 hours ago. Maybe
was that today?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
it didn't blow up on landing? They stuck the landing?
I think it caught on fire.
It did? Okay.
I didn't pay too much attention to it. I was in a car. But it's a really nice vehicle. It's nice to see someone who isn't like bound by Congress or other things. NASA had ideas for really, really advanced or unique rockets back when the Apollo program ended, because they were like, well, we've gone to the moon, what do we do next, and how do we do it cheaper?
Right.
That ended up being the space shuttle, but they had all these ideas that they were planning on pursuing where people were just like, that's going to be too much money, or we just don't need you to do that, so you can't. But seeing private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin come in, and they're bound by nothing but a profit motive, which NASA can pay them to do.
Sure.
And so they have, complete free will to go and design things like the massive Starship rocket, which is really exciting because you haven't been able to see that kind of innovation in quite some time.
And that is, I mean, just the sheer size of it, once they get it to work, that changes everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally
drastically
changes
everything.
Yeah. And it's, and I don't know if you saw this interview, right? That it was, and I think they've kind of downplayed it since, just because they don't want to. Gwen Shotwell, I think it's Gwen, did an interview a couple years ago talking about the Starliner and the fact that once they get it working, there's no physical reason why they couldn't just take off here, land in Australia a half hour later type of stuff.
Yeah.
It has the potential to do not just space travel, but it has it to disrupt just travel.
Yeah.
I mean, because once they get it running,
there's no stopping it.
Yeah, and I think because people are wondering why all the hover, and I think to me it's like, well, they're planning on. I mean, they're not saying it, but I think they're planning on just doing that. I mean, they could really change. Forget the Concorde faster than the speed of sounds. I mean, that really
just throws
disrupt
everything out the window. There's no plane that could possibly do what that could do.
Right.
Yeah.
And with its size, how many people could it hold? What are some of the configurations?
I don't know, but I do know that the current lunar configuration that was likely the whole Twitter debacle can carry roughly 200 tons once it's all ready to go. Yeah. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of bodies. That's
a lot.
Yeah. I know we've kind of veered off topic into the space, but that's where we wanted to go with and then Musk has had those calculations, the math, so to speak, on how many tons it would take to be sustainable on Mars, right? Actually just, so, I mean, that's where I think the tonnage, just sheer tonnage of being able to do, because otherwise if you can't get it all there, it's theory, right?
Yeah. If you can't get the stuff there, it's just speculation. And even if you could, all the capsules and everything are just so small. They're designed for like 3 people and you come back up.
Right.
Having something that can carry, 200 tons enables you to actually do things. You get there and you have, a full-sized cargo bay. It's not like 6 rocks returning to the moon. Right. It's, a full colony.
And it's interesting, I thought was fascinating, is they're doing it from low-cost materials, like it's basically a giant water tank.
Yeah.
I mean, it's watching them build the thing up. So we've got about 5 minutes left. So where would you like to, a little bit of a synopsis of academic paths for kids at Bret Harte, and then maybe a little bit of what, congratulatory stuff there.
Boy, I'm not sure if the academic paths.
Well, I mean, I guess this is a nice example to where lots of times people think that in small schools, especially in rural areas, that you can't win an academic decathlon in math. I think that lots of times people don't think that that's something that's normal, and I think this is another reason. I think this is very cool thing, and I think that's. I guess that was some of the brag on the school.
Brag on the school. Well, the biggest brag again is that we are a smaller school and the ability to really get to know our students and really encourage their strengths,
right?
And to push them a little bit or even pull them depending on which student we're talking about, and in all the various different things that all schools offer, whether it again be sports or in the arts or drama or even some of the unsung like Acadec. And in Academic Decathlon, it has its cameo performances. It's mentioned in one of the Spider-Man movies.
Very nice.
Peter Parker has to run to Acadec meeting.
Yes.
As well as a cameo in High School Musical. So that does have a small little fringe following out there, but it does play importance in a lot of schools that kids can show that they have academic strengths. Not necessarily with their GPAs and their overall grades, but they challenge themselves and prove that they do know the answers to what they study.
Yeah.
This is my 25th year at Bret Harte, and it's a school that I'm very glad and that they asked me to work there. Both my children are alumni of Bret Harte High School, and now generations into seeing other kids coming through our school.
Yeah, and as to the teachers helping you go through these academic paths, I'll only focus on the math one because it's relevant. But both the math teachers I had at Bret Harte, Mr. Randall and Mr. Sather, were really great helps in moving through math careers. They were super helpful when I took advanced math classes. And they were incredibly helpful in, finding classes once I'd finished the high school curriculum, things that I could do outside of just what the school was capable of offering. And they really worked their best to help me with an individualized math plan and everything, and that's only really possible because it's such a small school.
Yeah. I hope the future it brings you everything you want it to. It's with the skill set, you present yourself well, you good school. It's a go do great things. Leave your mark. That's the, it's because we all only get one shot at it, and so go leave that mark. Thank you. Thanks for excelling. It sounds kind of crazy, but I think. The kids that excel, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to excel because it's an example. It's an example to prove that it can be done and to kind of blaze a path to where, the peer pressure thing to where I did it, you need to do it too. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.